The baseball season is long and can be very unexpected. That is what the 2012 MLB season taught us, as there was a lot of first-timers and streak breakers during that year, as the Washington Nationals made the playoffs for the first time since moving to DC in 2005, and other teams like, the Oakland Athletics playing Moneyball again to somehow win the division over the two-time defending AL champion Texas Rangers.
Fly ball, center field, Coco, ball game, Western Division. The Oakland A's have shocked the Rangers and the baseball world, and they are the AL Western Division Championship. Unbelievable!
And the Baltimore Orioles also ended a 13-year playoff drought. Yeah, I know, to the surprise of everyone, including Orioles fans, they finished with 93 wins, a second-place finish in the AL East, good enough to become a wildcard team, ending a playoff drought that began back in 1998, the year that ya boy was born. Now, this season was special for Orioles baseball, as it made fans seem to care about baseball again. We weren't having fun, and every season it was like we were looking forward to it, but we kind of dreaded it because we knew what was coming. But with this season, it just kind of came out of nowhere and hit out of left field. I mean, the Orioles did make some acquisitions this year, but nothing that really would pop off the page. I mean, for the most part, the only hitter they added in the offseason, or should I say hitters, were Wilson Benedict to mainly DH, Andy Chavez to be a bench outfielder, and Nick Johnson, who we weren't even sure what he was going to do, coming off an injury-plagued 2011 season. This was also a year where star right fielder Nick Markakis would break his hand late in the season after CC Sabathia hit him with a pitch.
Ooh. Oh, man. On the hand, and Markakis immediately heads over to the dugout.
He would miss the remainder of the regular season and all of the postseason. Yet somehow the Orioles continued to persevere, they continued to conquer, and they almost took the AL East from the powerhouse Yankees, falling within 2 games. Some key players from this team include Mark Reynolds, who had a down year from the previous year in 2011 with the O's, but nonetheless, he was good, having a stretch where he would homer 8 times in 7 games.
3-ball, 2-strike delivery to him in the air, to left field. It is deep. Are you kidding me? Goodbye, home run! Unbelievable!
Adam Jones, who was really starting to come into his own, had his first ever 30-homer season and his 3rd All-Star Game appearance. J.J. Hardy, although the batting average went down, the power was still there and the defense was still superb. And Matt Wieters, just like in Adam Jones in 2011, really started to come into his own as not just a good offensive backstop, but a great one behind the plate. Plus, Chris Davis, a guy who was thrown into a trade with the Texas Rangers last year, came out and hit 33 home runs and kind of had his really true breakout here. I know a lot of people would say that the following season in 2013 was like his big breakout with the 53 homer season, but most people forget in 2012 he showed you what he was capable of doing, and he came to his potential with the Orioles.
Taking his time. High fly ball to right, back on it, top it up, back it goes, and it's gone! It just got out! On a broken bat, Chris Davis hits a home run.
But I think heading into this season, one of the things that everybody knew that the Orioles kind of lacked was starting pitching. I mean, their youngster Brian Mattis, kind of after a decent 2010, declined heavily in 2011. Sure, they did have youngsters Jake Arrieta and Zach Britton win double-digit games, but at the same point in time, they weren't necessarily quite ready to take it to the next level yet. So the Orioles decided to make a surprise move by trading their ace of the past 4 years, Jeremy Guthrie, to the Colorado Rockies in exchange for Jason Hammel. So an established pitcher for another one wasn't necessarily a huge trade, but for Orioles fans losing our ace like that, we kind of didn't really know where we were heading. They would also sign international free agent Wei-Yin Chen, who would go on to lead the Orioles in wins and innings pitched during this season, so that one ended up being a massive hit, as for 4 years Wei-Yin Chen would be near or at the top of the Orioles starting rotation until his departure in 2016. And of course, with Jeremy Guthrie gone, the Orioles decided to make Jake Arrieta their starter, but eventually he would be sent back down to the minor leagues because, well, I don't know if these stats suffice as ace material. The big thing the Orioles did in 2012, though, was they rebuilt the bullpen. It wasn't a complete teardown, but they made moves to make sure that if anything about the pitching was going to be good, it would be the bullpen to help hold it down late in games. As Jim Johnson was now the full-time closer, as they kind of gave up on Kevin Gregg, they added Luis Ayala to the mix along with Matt Lindstrom, while also having youngsters Pedro Strop and Troy Patton also come into their own. And the struggling Brian Mattis and Tommy Hunter, who started the year in the rotation, would later go into the bullpen and become really solid pieces there as well. But the big addition that kind of went under the radar was we got Darren O'Day off of waivers from the Texas Rangers. Now, why was this move not seen as huge at the time? Well, because in 2010 and 2011, during the Texas Rangers pennant-winning seasons, Darren O'Day wasn't there a lot. He was dealing with injuries, and a lot of people thought that his career was over. But in 2012, he pitched to a 2.28 ERA for the Orioles in 69 games and resurrected his career. And he would be with the Orioles till the trade deadline in 2018, where his best years are with those successful Orioles squads. And because the bullpen was so good, one of the things the Orioles were able to do was win the close games. As when you look at the runs scored by the Orioles and the runs given up, you wonder how this team won 93 games in the first place, as they had 712 runs scored and 705 runs allowed, meaning that their Pythagorean win-loss record, which is basically, it just takes your run differential and predicts your record based off of that. Since the Orioles only had a +7 run differential, their Pythagorean win-loss record was 82-80, which, hey, still would have sufficed for Orioles fans. We probably wouldn't have went to the playoffs, but we would have had a winning record for the first time in a long time. You look, and the Orioles, in actuality, won 11 more games. Well, one of the reasons for that was because they were successful in one-run games. I mean, good bullpens tend to hold it down, and in 2012, the Orioles played 38 one-run games, in which they were going to win 29 of them. Then, you also gotta be a little bit lucky sometimes, too, as the Orioles played in a league-high 18 extra inning games and won 16 out of those 18, including their last 16 of the season after falling in their first 2 extra inning games. Which, to put that into perspective, how impressive that was, this was back before all the extra inning rules of, oh, there's a runner to start on second base. Like, the Orioles were playing some rulingly long games. They played an 18-inning game late in the year in Seattle, and then there's the infamous 17-inning game in Boston in which Chris Davis pitched 2 shutout innings and was the winning pitcher.
Sweeney and Pedroia, the base runners. That's going to go to short. Could be 2. Andino. The Orioles win it. Chris Davis is the winning pitcher.
Like, it just seemed like this Oriole team wasn't going to necessarily mollywop you or anything, but if you got into a close game with them, that's when you had to be the most scared, because you knew you were going to have to face those guys in the bullpen who rarely gave up any runs, any home runs, any hits. Or if you were going to extra innings with them, you just knew that the Orioles would make the plays and the hits at the right time to win the game. There just was no escaping it. So how did the Orioles do in the playoffs exactly? Because a lot of these teams don't necessarily go far in the playoffs. Well, 2012 was the introduction to the MLB's one-and-done wild card game, meaning that you played one game in the wild card, and the winner of that game advanced to the ALDS. Now, because the Orioles and Rangers both had the same record, but the Rangers had the tiebreaker on the season, they played this game in Texas. And the Orioles starting pitcher in this game was actually Joe Saunders, a guy who they picked up off of waivers in the middle of the season. Each team got a run in the first inning, but after that, Joe Saunders would pitch 4 shutout innings past that, and the bullpen did bullpen things while the hitting took advantage of some Texas Ranger mistakes, and the Orioles would go on to win the game 5-1.
2 out. Fly ball left field. That's it. Nate McLouth is there. And the magical season of the Baltimore Orioles continues.
Advancing on to the ALDS, where they would take on their division rival, the New York Yankees, in what is actually a pretty underrated division series, I would say, as after the Yankees took Game 1 by a score of 7-2, Games 2, 3, 4, and 5 were all decided by 2 runs or less, and neither team ended up winning more than 1 game in a row. It went in a pattern: Yankees, Orioles, Yankees, Orioles, Yankees, and the Orioles lost the series in 5. But Orioles fans that year weren't necessarily thinking, oh, we can get to the World Series. Just getting to the ALDS and taking it to 5 hard-fought games with their division rival gave us hope that the future was bright. And from 2012 to 2016, the Orioles would make the playoffs 3 times, win the division once, And they had the most wins in the American League during that 5-year period, making it the most successful 5-year period the Orioles have had since the 1970s. I like to say that this 2012 Orioles team is similar to this Orioles team was just so much fun to watch. For the first time ever in my life, I saw the Orioles not get to under 500 at all that season, as after starting the season off with a 3-game sweep of the lowly Minnesota Twins, the Orioles would hit the 500 mark a couple times, but then would never look back and would just continue raising their above 500 record. And to prove that this season wasn't a fluke afterwards, I think was the biggest success for the Orioles, because a lot of these teams that are like this, that come out of nowhere, they have these blips and then they kind of, fall off and we don't hear from them again for the next 10 years or so. But the Orioles in 2013 won 85 games, didn't make the playoffs, but had another winning season. And of course in 1996, that was a magical year where they won the AL East and got all the way to the ALCS, where they did lose to a surprising team that year, the Cinderella wildcard team of the Kansas City Royals. So sometimes, as this team will show you, it's better to be lucky than good. Not saying that this team wasn't good, but there was a lot of luck involved, and the fact that they made these moves, especially like in the bullpen, that was where things started to kind of look up for the team as they took risks, and the risks worked. And even after they lost Nick Markakis and didn't panic, they moved Chris Davis to right field, moved Mark Reynolds over to first base where his defense improved mightily, and then called up their 19-year-old #1 prospect Manny Machado to play third base, who in 51 games played pretty well for a 19-year-old. Thus led to a bright future for Orioles baseball. And hey, now in 2024 with the season, but hey, that's it for me. I'd like to hear in the comments below from some other Oriole fans, what was this season like for you? I mean, obviously it was special, but this season had to have done something to your spirit, where when I started watching baseball when I was 8 years old, the Orioles were losers, and it was guaranteed they would be losers every year. But in 2012, it just felt great to experience this and experience postseason play, and for once not be the laughing stock of the league, and just give some hope that the Orioles were back to form, and for a while they were. And it was also fun too because the Baltimore Ravens would later win the Super Bowl this year too, so it was a very good year for Baltimore sports nonetheless. But yeah, that's it for me. Stay safe out there, and until then, I will catch you all during the baseball season, and let's go O's.